Hello and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be continuing our ongoing exploration into ways in which science and mysticism are finding new common ground. Our guest is Brian Swimme, a physicist who serves as co-director of the Institute in Culture and Creation Spirituality at Holy Names College in Oakland. Dr. Swimme is the author of Manifesto for a Global Civilization, and most recently, The Universe is a Green Dragon. Dr. Swimme, we hear the term bandied about a lot. I wonder if you might give us a starting point and tell us what is first cause?
What is first cause?
It's a little simple question to kind of get us rolling.
I like it. The first cause is desire. I would say that the first cause of the universe and the first cause of any human action, first cause of any action of any life form, begins with desire.
Where does the first cause desire reside?
That's the fundamental mystery that I think we can only adjust to, the fact that it is something that exists before us, and we accommodate the ultimate desire of the universe. For a long time, I used to think of gravity as being something solid and well-known and mathematical, but now, after studying it for a decade or two, I realize that gravity itself is a form of desire.
How do you mean that?
I mean in the sense that if you look at the equations of gravity, you can learn a lot about the way in which certain objects move. We've learned a lot since Newton and Einstein, this fantastic scientific thought. But Newton, at the very end of his life, was still asking, why is it that the bodies move? Why is it they gravitate toward each other? So there's this fundamental allurement in the universe that we respond to. So the Earth responds to the sun. There is a relationship, and it's one of now. To use the word desire, it's that might seem too playful or too glib. I don't mean it that way. I mean that there is a fundamental attraction between the sun and the Earth. And that in the form of the human attraction, we use the word desire. In the form of the physical world, we say the word gravitation. But at the very root of everything, the first cause is this underlying allurement of everything. I would even say one way to understand a person's life is a series of decisions that are based on responses to the discovery of allurement. Your choice of spouse, if you're married, your profession, the sort of clothes you wear, it's all a response to what we discover, an interest we discover. So I realize that, one of the things I'm trying to do is to see the relationship between the human and the cosmos. We're not separate from the cosmos, we're actually an outcome of it. So this is one fundamental way of seeing this relationship. We respond to what fascinates us. So does the Earth. And so does the Milky Way galaxy. But there the word fascination is changed to what attracts us, what attracts the galaxy. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
That
Traditionally, in the scientific method, the scientist was taught to consider himself as something apart from the experiment, a separateness and not really affecting the process. Lately, we've talked to a number of scientists who suggest that that's impossible, that the simple act of observation has an impact on whatever experiment is taking place. Where do you stand in terms of the process?
Well, I look at the last 3 centuries of science and what we've discovered about the universe as comparable to the great revelations of the world religions. What we've learned in the scientific endeavor is not replacing the sacred revelations, but it's of that order of magnitude. So something very significant has happened, and the way in which we arrived at it was, in a real sense, this, as you point out, this assumption that we could separate ourselves from the phenomena and examine it objectively. And through that, we were able to escape a kind of anthropomorphism, a projection onto the world. We really learned about the dynamics of the universe. But now, as we've gotten to a more subtle understanding, it turns out that the idea that we can separate ourselves from the universe is somewhat of an illusion. There's a way in which there's no such thing as a human, as a universe without the human. So there's no such thing as an experiment that we're involved with that isn't affected by the human. I think it was a necessary assumption for arriving at what we did, but now there's a widespread understanding that we don't learn about the universe as if it were totally other from us.
If we are an integral part of the universe, and the universe is an integral part of us, how do we begin to explore the quote-unquote mysteries of the universe, the unexplainable things, the view into the night sky?
Yeah, let me say something about that, the way in which we are an integral part of the universe, the way in which the universe is an integral part of us. That alone, I think, is one of the great contributions of recent scientific thought. Let me say a few things about that. I think one of the most thrilling discoveries in 20th century science is the discovery of the supernova. The supernova is the moment of death of a star. A star will last, some stars will last, say, 5 billion years. And then they will, it's very interesting, a star, in the center of the star, all the elements are created. So, for instance, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, all those are created in the center of a star. And then after 5 billion years, there's this vast explosion. The elements are sent all throughout, in all directions. And these then gather again and form into more stars and planetary systems. So what that means then is that our bodies, for instance, are made up of carbon and oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, nitrogen. All of these elements of our skin and bone and brain right now of our body were made in the core of a star. So one of the ways in which we are beginning to appreciate how we're integral with the universe is to recognize that we understand that we come from our parents. We understand we have a sense of gratitude for America for providing us with so many opportunities for development. But now our sense of gratitude extends all the way back through the life forms to the stars themselves. Now, I find this overwhelming, in particular because this intuition that we came from the stars was one that was valued in the primordial traditions of humanity. It's not a new idea within the human species, but now it has an experimental, empirical verification. There's a sense in which before, okay, fine, a tribe has a story about how we came from the stars, and that might have worked. But as moderns, we can't be moved by that. But suddenly that we can understand the way in which stars gave birth to the very material of our bodies. This, to me, is a fascination and a way of entering into the very mystery of this universe.
What about the creation of the non-physical part of our reality? Is science prepared to deal with that?
I think so. Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, and this to me is perhaps even the most thrilling thing that's come about. If I had to name one thing, it would be the recognition that the universe in its most material manifestations is permeated with mind. Now that's I'm using the word mind in a larger sense than a human mind. But let me see if I can convince you that this perspective on the universe is now possible. The universe began 20 billion years ago, and it began in this enormous rush of light. People call it the Big Bang, but there was no sound. It was a silent rush of light. And what Stephen Hawking, he is one of the foremost theoretical physicists. He's at Cambridge, England. What he discovered, he was examining the way in which, you have to imagine this enormous outpouring of light, all directions, and there are particles intermixed with that. And so what he discovered was that if you slowed down that expansion, I mean slowed it down 1%, less than that, 1/1,000,000 of a percent, even less, 1/1,000,000 of a millionth of a percent slower. If you did, the entire universe would have collapsed back on itself billions of years ago. Just a slight change. On the other hand, Hawking also discovered, using the mathematics of this early time, that if the expansion were slightly greater, just slightly greater, then all of the particles would have rushed apart and never would have formed into galaxies or planets or bodies. So it is, and so what's the conclusion from that? One thing you can say is, well, it was really lucky. We lucked out. It was great. If it had been slightly different, we wouldn't be here now. And that's a possible conclusion a person can make. But then you discover something else. There's actually a slight swirl in this beginning moment. It's a slight asymmetry. If there had been no asymmetry, then too, no life forms would have come forth. If the asymmetry had been slightly greater, then it would have created these vast tidal wave motions that would have just broken apart the galaxies as soon as they developed. So what we're discovering then is a way of understanding the fireball explosion at the beginning of time as more like a developing egg. More like a developing egg. You see, if a human at conception, so a human comes into existence, say at conception, a living egg. Well, we would say that there's life because it's involved with its own unfolding and it's starting to knit together arms and eyes. So we'd say, well, there's life or there's some kind of intelligence involved there. Now we're seeing that in the very origin of the universe. And I have another example from the Earth, but maybe you have a
no, but let's have that.
Okay, so that'd be a way of understanding a sense of intelligence permeating the very birth of the universe. So I like to call it now the cosmic egg. We can think of it as a living entity. But another example comes from our more recent history, the Earth itself. So imagine this: the Earth, if the temperature, the average temperature of the Earth, I don't mean in local regions, but if the overall average temperature of the Earth were to go up by 2 degrees, just 2 degrees, then it would throw the Earth into a system that would lead to the whole Earth becoming like a hot a steam bath, unable to support any advanced forms of life. So 2 degrees up does that. Now, go 2 degrees down. If you go 2 degrees down, for instance, it goes like this. If you go down by 2 degrees, the oceans get cool. They draw certain gases out of the atmosphere. These gases hold some of the heat on the Earth. When these are taken away, the heat leaves, and so the whole Earth goes into a cooling. It's called a runaway situation in cybernetics. And with a 2 degree drop, the Earth would become an ice ball. So this is something we've discovered. It's fantastic. We have a 2 degree range in either direction, and if we went out beyond that, it would remove all life from the planet Earth. Now, what's the first reaction to that? Generally speaking, it can be, well, we lucked out. If we were further away from the Earth, it would have been bad. From the sun. Or if we were close to the sun, it would have been terrible. But then scientists discovered this, that while the Earth has been in existence, say for 4.6 billion years, the temperature of the Earth, the temperature of the sun has been increasing all the time. The temperature of the sun has gone up by thousands of degrees. In the core, it's gone up by millions of degrees. And so throughout that 4 billion years, the Earth has had to work to maintain a certain temperature. So it's as if the Earth now organizes itself to remain within a certain band of conditions where life can unfold. Now, these are very recent discoveries. They're very hard to understand exactly how to frame them theoretically. But what I'm saying is that many scientists see this as suggesting that the Earth itself is alive. So your question then was, what about the non-physical aspects of the human? Where do those emerge? They were present at the very beginning of the universe. And now they have been shaped and they've been focused. You see, the way to think of it is the consciousness of the fireball, the mind of the fireball. Perhaps it was in a different form, but now it's been focused in the form of a human mind or in the form of a frog mind. So the emergence of the non-physical is within the physical.
When we talk about the Big Bang or the first light or that rush of light, are we talking about all that there is, or are we talking about the origin of the local universe?
Good question. We live on the planet Earth, and it goes around our sun. That's one star, And the galaxy that we happen to live in is the Milky Way galaxy. There are 100 billion stars within that galaxy. Now, so generally speaking, when we say our home, people think of maybe I live down this block, this street, but other people think of the Earth. Other people think of the solar system. I tend to think of our galaxy as being our home. This galaxy has a number of galaxies around it, 24 to 50 galaxies nearby. That would be the local group of galaxies. But in the whole universe, there are perhaps 100 billion galaxies, all of them around the size of the Milky Way. It's a very huge universe we have out there. All of this 100 billion galaxy universe began at the same time, 20 billion years ago, in this great emergence of the fireball. That was your question. It's not a local creation in the sense that of the known universe. I mean, we know about this empirical universe. All of this we know came from one point in time and space.
What about those people who suggest that really none of it exists, that we're really just the figments of some intelligent dream somewhere? And when that intelligence ceased to recognize our existence or decides to change its thought, that all of this physical reality that we see will cease to exist?
Well, I guess my response is I was at Lick Observatory last night, and we were one of my students was asking me, the stars seem so far away. We were looking at galaxies. We were looking at a globular cluster of stars, say 1 million stars, and this cluster was 36,000 light years away. So when we were looking, the light that was arriving left 36,000 years ago, and I was saying, just imagine 36,000 years ago, and what were the human communities like, and all of that. And she said, it just seems so big and so vast. Maybe it's not that far away, and maybe it's all just an illusion. And then I brought her over to this another part of the observatory where we have these huge meteorites. These things weigh tons, and they come in from outer space. I said, you can try to pretend there's nothing out there, but every now and then you get a messenger from outer space, and if you're in the way of one of these meteorites, you learn to believe very quickly in the reality of the universe. But there is a sense in which the phenomenal world is illusory, and even in physics we have a way of discussing that. In particular, what is most shocking is that we tend to think of ourselves as being very solid. I mean, after all, everybody's on a diet, and the notion of trying to reduce your body weight is well known to Americans. But if you examine the body from the point of view of physics, it turns out that over 99.99% of the human body is empty, is emptiness. I mean, there's just nothing there. We're made up of atoms. We're made up of trillions and trillions of atoms. You've learned that in grade school and all. If you take one atom, my example is you take one atom and just blow it up, because it's too small to look at, but just make it bigger so you get a good picture of it. Make it as big as Yankee Stadium. Then that one atom has a small little strawberry for its center, and the outside is a little gnat flying very, very way up high in the lights. That would be one atom. And all the stuff in between, we call the outside the electrons, the inside the nucleus. All the stuff in between electrons and nucleus is just nothing. So there is a way in which we are fundamentally diaphanous, and and people can appreciate that perhaps with years of meditation or with years of scientific training. That in either case there's a sense of emptiness. The human is empty.
What do you mean when you say the universe is a green dragon?
I was attempting to a couple things. One, my original titles were very heavy. I talked about reality and destiny and space and time and those types of things, and I thought that isn't really my intent. It's more I'm trying to announce something that's just so thrilling to me. And some of these discoveries I've talked about, this recognition that we're all involved in one vast energetic event, but even more than that, it's that it seems to be alive. It seems as if the origin moment was an egg, like I say, and so the dragon idea is to speak to this notion of vitality in the universe. See, we've been trained through the modern era is to think of life itself. Jacques Monod, he's one of the famous biologists of the world today, and he considers he's of the old school. He considers life as this accident, as this negligible accident on some planet. And given the scientific data that he was working with, that's a proper conclusion. But now what we're discovering is that life is not confined to individual living beings. Life turns out to be a principle of the universe. It's something that is innate. It's deeply rooted into the structure of the universe. So that was the notion I was trying to get at, was a dragon. It's alive. But why I chose the dragon is because, you see, we tend to think of the universe as somewhat mundane, and we think of dragons as being kind of strange, but it's just the opposite. The universe is very, very strange, and dragons are commonplace compared to just how strange the universe is. This is the kind of connotations I was trying to get across, and the notion that we need to play with these ideas because they are so recent. So I wanted to have a certain playfulness there as well.
In nature, when something gets out of kilter, if it's a star, it explodes and goes off and creates new stars. If it's a planet and it gets too hot, it burns up. If it gets too cold, it freezes into an ice ball and life ceases to exist. How is it then in the human condition that we can get so out of whack and still continue to function within the human realm?
How do we continue to function? Well, I think that's a great question. So we have, you see, in a certain physical situation, which you've listed them all, there are certain dynamics, and as long as we remain within these dynamics, we have a well-functioning system, let's say. In the human system, our fundamental dynamic is the story. When I say the story, I mean the way in which we explain things to ourselves. Where's the meaning of the human event? So, we go to our jobs, we bring a paycheck and all that, but there are certain moments we sit back and we go, what is it all about? What am I doing? What am I investing my life in? And in those moments, the story of the culture is what the answer is. So if you're raised 20,000 years ago in Africa, there's a certain story explaining what it was about. And if you're raised in European Christianity, there's another story, or the Japanese of the 16th century. Now, one of our difficulties at the time now is we've outgrown lots of these stories. And the thrilling news is that a new story is emerging, one that enables the humans to enter into life more meaningfully, in a way that doesn't depend upon your cultural origin or your religion or your upbringing. That's what I'm trying to announce too, is that there's a way in which all of us can agree upon this universe. I remember I visited an Indian village, and I was watching these people, and they're beautiful and everything, and the way they explained what the meaning of life was, about how the creation of the world took place, was so moving. I thought, this is what we modern humans don't have in the industrial era. But this, with a new story, beginning with the fireball and the Earth's evolution, we have a way of recreating a world which meaningful activity can take place, and avoiding a kind of collapse is what you were suggesting or wondering about.
In the physical sense, when a star explodes, we call it the death of a star. If a planet freezes over, we call it the death of a planet. What is the nature of death?
I think the important thing about death is that we see it within. See, the kind of question you asked right there is, it's a fundamental question. It's so important. And the way I always approach the question is via this cosmic story. So the first thing in approaching death, the first thing I want to say is this. Death is an invention. So death, even in life, in the terms of life, on this planet, life has been around for approximately 4 billion years. Now, it's often a shock for people to understand that death was created. It was actually invented by life itself. The first organisms never died naturally. These are called the prokaryotes, and they extended for, say, 2 billion years, and there was no death created. So the question really is, why did life create death? And the answer is for greater novelty, greater adventure, especially for humans. I think that if we were aware if there's some way we could avoid death, we would, by becoming very cautious and hiding away or whatever, and nothing but a hygiene, we would do that because death is fearful. But because death is inevitable, it enables humans to enter more fully into the adventure of life and bringing forth the gifts that we have that otherwise would lie dormant. So, from this aspect of living now, death can be seen as an opportunity, as a blessing, really, for living fully.
How will the world change when citizens of this planet accept themselves as citizens of the universe as opposed to residents of the state of California or some other locale?
Well, one of the things that would happen would be there would be a new sense of awe and reverence. New sense of awe. One of the things that we lack in our society is a sense of reverence. But let me just tell you how I would see that. A sense of awe and a sense of mystery. One of the perhaps some of you are even lying in bed now and relaxing. This is a meditation I would suggest for you as a way of entering into the mystery of the universe and as becoming a citizen of the universe. And it's this. I like to think of, as I say before, the star. There was one particular star that exploded and gave birth to all of the materials of every human, every animal, everything about the planet Earth. So this is where the meditation begins. We start 5 billion years ago. Now, 5 billion years ago, there was no Earth. And so you imagine, you think of all of these materials drifting through space. So imagine, too, the particles of your own body, the atoms of your own body, they're all spread out throughout space. In fact, there's probably millions of miles between atoms comprising your knuckle and atoms comprising your brain. They're all spread out. And now, think of what is the probability that all of those elements would come together sometime and form you? The probability is zero, perhaps, or it's so slight, vanishingly slight. Yet somehow or another, the universe had the power, the dynamic of bringing that all together into our particular body, our particular moment of life. So there's a way of recognizing that we're involved with this vast mystery, and our time here is to contribute to the unfolding of this mystery, the story.
Is nothing ever lost in terms of matter?
Yes, matter's lost. There is particles of matter can disappear into emptiness. In fact, right now in this room, throughout this universe, particles are leaping into existence out of nothing. You see, before you might think of if we took out all the air in this room and all the matter, we'd have just emptiness. And previously we thought, well, that's just like an empty box. There's nothing there, and it's inert. It's dead. But it turns out it's just the opposite. That this empty realm is the source of everything. It's the potential source for everything. Now, where did all the particles come from? It's quite likely they came out of nothingness. They emerged out of nothingness. And I mean, it actually fits our empirical data. Actually fits the theory that would explain how these came out of nothingness. And this too would be an insight that is very ancient. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century spoke of the creation of the universe ex nihilo, out of nothingness. So perhaps it's another way of arriving at the same deep truth. Maybe science is approaching something that has been recognized in a different way in the spiritual traditions. So things do come out of nothingness. Things return to nothingness.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen.